Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to crisis management, business continuity, emergency management, COVID, well-being, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only person named Alex Fullick on LinkedIn, so I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Speaking of LinkedIn, that's how I found today's guest. I'd like to welcome Business Continuity Manager, Charlein Barni. Sorry, Charlein Barni.
No worries.
Charlie, apology, Charlein.
No,
Sorry.
no, 'tis be the season for crackly throats.
Yeah, I was just about to cough when I said your name. I was like, oh my goodness. How are you today?
Today is a great day. It's been a busy week, and I'm excited, and I'll be honest, a little bit nervous to have this conversation, but it's a good day.
Don't be nervous. I've had lots of people on the show before who have never done this type of thing before, and every single one of them enjoyed it.
Fantastic.
So I'm sure you will. At least I expect you to. And if not, you're going to tell me, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
We're going to talk about business continuity and client experience today, which is something that is a topic that hasn't been on this show before. I'm coming up to 500 episodes, and that one has never cropped up before. So I'm looking forward to hearing the things you have to say. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into this crazy industry of ours?
Oh, sure. A little bit about me. Charlein Barni, Business Continuity Manager. I have 25 years in telecommunications, tech, finance, and healthcare, primarily serving in customer and IT service management roles, operations, and business resilience. So business continuity, disaster recovery, and crisis management. That's a little bit about me. Currently, I serve as a continuity manager for Molina Healthcare and just looking after that continuation of care for our members and our business. So it's a little bit about me.
Well, coming out of COVID, you must have been really busy for the last couple of years.
Actually, I got to be honest. I started with Molina about in May, so only a few months ago. During COVID, I was with GCI. It's a large telecommunication company in Alaska. So much of the pandemic, most of the pandemic, I was serving GCI, which did keep us busy. And I think it really built, and I think we've heard this a lot in podcasts and in our industry, it really built an appreciation for that hybrid workforce or that remote workforce, and that distribution of service that we can offer. So, and also it made us all realize we needed to brush off those pandemic plans. And there's many people that have talked about that. And we've seen a lot of posts like on LinkedIn about that too. But yeah, so pandemic and COVID and lockdown and this new world has definitely kept me busy.
Well, this new world certainly would have changed the client experience. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So my first question is going to be the obvious one. What's meant by client experience?
Client experience.
Or customer experience, I should say.
Customer experience, yeah. Customer experience is about the journey. So for me in business continuity planning, I'm constantly thinking about the internal experience as well as the external experience and how both are impacted when those bad things happen. In terms of business continuity planning, the customer experience or journey for me is the stakeholders that we're engaging with to keep involved and constantly thinking about resilience, about what we are going to do to continue operations, again, should that bad thing happen. We all play a part, and that impacts that customer experience. So it's the customer journey internally and externally.
Do I have to be somebody, this is kind of a silly question, but so many people interpret things differently. Do I have to be a customer by purchasing a product or service?
No, the customer is the person internally that is a part of the delivery of the product or service, and the customer is that person externally on the receiving end of that product or service. So in my head, the customer experience is holistic.
It sounds like a little bit of project management in there.
Yeah, there's
Because I know from my own experience, I've worked in projects and programs and been a program office person, that it's stakeholder management.
It's very much stakeholder management. So business continuity planning, we're dealing with those process owners, those boots on the ground that are ensuring that those mission critical processes continue when that bad thing happens. We're dealing with the executive leadership to ensure that they understand what their role is to play to provide that strategic direction when the bad thing happens. I probably say that more now than ever, with the huge focus on business continuity planning and the realization that we're all part of that culture, you know, to sustain our ability to deliver the products and services.
Well, when does the customer experience begin? When does it end, or does it even end?
It begins when we're scoping. So when we're implementing the program, or even refreshing a dormant program. It begins when we are looking at what those mission critical functions are within our organizations, and laying that groundwork for the relationship with those executives or those senior leaders that are helping us understand and define what those critical functions are. It follows with identifying who those mission critical people are within the organization that will become those that activate any recovery plans that build. And also it carries to those, again, process owners that will see to the continuation of those processes. I don't know if it ends. I suppose when the organization ceases to exist, there's an ending, but you continue to keep that relationship and that experience alive. You know, you're constantly, in my opinion, I think there's a need to constantly keep engaged. So the beginning again is scoping the program and establishing that relationship with program sponsors or executive leadership. And then it carries through the relationships you build with those owners of critical functions and processes.
Any suggestions on how to maintain that? Because we mentioned the word project, and you even said that sometimes reinitiating or jump starting, maybe a stalled program. How do you keep that updated, knowing that in many organizations, there's change is constant? New projects come on board or acquisitions and things like that. So the customer, I'm envisioning a customer list will constantly be changing.
Oh, how do you keep it fresh? I think it's establishing that steering committee and having those relationships where you're reporting into a group to, one, let them know about the health of your program and what you're finding as you're building plans or testing plans. But then two, that steering committee that's feeding you information about how the organization is changing or upcoming products and services that may be offered. In terms of information, how do you keep that fresh? There are feeds into business continuity management systems that are helpful. There's also, that reach out that your business continuity planners could be doing to capture or gather that information. Textbook, says, like best standards, say, refresh the program or the plan as business changes. Well, how do you do that? Again, it's keeping that constant connection, that relationship. So it's not just checking a box. We have requirements to comply to check a box and have a business continuity plan in place. but it goes way beyond that. It's establishing that relationship, as well as having those that you have established the relationship with, having them carry your message about resilience into their teams, sharing the plan with them, making sure everybody in the org knows what to do, how to respond when the bad thing happens, to recover and resume operations without delay and effectively.
How can organizations, because you mentioned, there are systems that can be put in place, I'm assuming you meant applications?
Yeah,
Right?
applications.
Applications. So I'm assuming that if you have an application, sure, you can tie things together. But let's face it, some of those, they're not cheap. And
No.
small and medium-sized businesses can't afford that kind of thing. So how can you kind of go about to establish some of those, the network and the connections that you reference? Any ideas on how you can do that so that you don't miss customers?
Yeah, I think about the small and medium-sized businesses a lot, or even I prefer to say organizations, because we have organizations, churches, schools, public entities that may not have dedicated business continuity planning programs in place. And I think it's a matter of taking initiative to use the tools that are available, as well as setting up a cadence to check that information, talk about what you're going to do, and test. And again, carry on that conversation. You don't need a $50,000 business continuity management system if you're a small to medium-sized business. You need maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet, maybe it's a Word doc, but it's also the commitment and investment to do it. The realization that we all are a part of the continuation of what it is that we're doing. So it's a matter of doing it. You don't need a large BCMS or business continuity management system to do it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounded like you were talking a little bit about culture.
Oh, culture all day long. Culture all day long. Really, if all of us, even in our personal lives, are not thinking about what plan B is going to be for those things, those needed resources, those things we need to do what we do or have what we have that is most important to us. If we're not thinking about that just on a day-to-day personal level, even your health, what are you doing to be resilient today, to show up, be strong, be ready, and go when the bad thing happens, for yourself personally, for your family, for your job, and then at the end of the day, for the customer.
How about what does a good culture mean, especially business continuity management culture, mean from a vendor or a external partner's perspective? What does that do for them? Because they would be a customer, right?
Yeah.
How important is it to have a good culture, and so that they don't feel as though they're just, how do I put that? Kind of like being used. We're just making money off of you, or you're just here to do this, and about anything else. How important is that connection?
I think that culture, once you embed that culture, that mindset that everybody is thinking about what plan B is, should they face disruption. Once you embed that, when those people in your organization show up at the table to initiate a service, they're going to be looking for the same from the vendor. And they're going to be asking, okay, great. This is a great product or service. Now tell me what you're going to do if your facilities fail, if the technology you depend on to give us this product or service fails. What are you going to do? Tell me, if you lose your people, if you face a pandemic, how are you going to continue to do this? Because when we're receiving third-party services as an organization, it's so easy to sign the contract, get it in, get everybody excited, and business is rolling, and your products or your services are even better. But when that fails, you really got to think about, and also the culture. If you show up at the table and you're thinking about what those plan Bs are for that vendor, you'll be expecting it. You'll be looking for it. And hopefully you'll establish escalation and communication procedures, to continue should they fail.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't some of those conversations be tough and difficult? Because you may not want to convey anything that you're doing in your organization to a point, and neither might they. So how do you kind of give and take so that people are happy without giving away, all the details and your secrets?
Maybe it's a non-disclosure agreement. Maybe there's a contract in place that says, hey, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my secret sauce, and you can share your secret sauce, and then we may consider signing on the dotted line. Mm-hmm. So it could be you safeguard your secret sauce with an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement. It could be that they provide you just some redacted information from the plans that they have in place. The proof is in the pudding when you do go into business with them and the bad thing happens and they don't have those contingencies. It's then that you really need to hold them accountable, setting up control action plans and following up and considering probably alternate vendors, and really looking at, what is the expiration date of that service agreement?
What about, what are some of the key things that organizations get wrong when it comes to the customer experience, internal and external? I know you've kind of hinted at a few along the way.
Yeah, what do they get wrong? Probably from an internal customer experience, not scoping, saying, oh, okay, well, we need to have a business continuity plan. Let's just willy-nilly, so to say, start building plans for each department or each line of business that only touches the product or service. And it's in the implementation. So if they're not getting wrong, if we're not sitting down to really understand what is mission critical, what the risks are, what our risk appetite is, setting risk rating scales to effectively quantify and qualify impacts, whether it be a financial impact, a customer impact, legal, operational impact. If we're not setting those things up right up front, we're not going to be able to establish a really good roadmap and rules to set our program up to play out. So I think from an internal customer experience, it's not setting up or scoping the implementation of the program. Along with that, internal customer experience, what can we get wrong? Without scoping, we're not establishing the relationships that we need to support our program. Not scoping, we're not having that conversation with those executive leaders. We're not establishing a steering committee. We're not setting up, just bare bones key performance indicators to measure the health of the program we're building. So I really think it's not really appropriately or methodically implementing. From an external customer experience, from a business continuity planning perspective, if we're not, what are we getting wrong? If we're not going through the implementation and we're not setting up a really organized program, at the end of the day, we're not going to have the plans in place to continue to deliver those products and services that may be necessary, or even understand what those risks are, or even be able to report on what those risks are.
Now, you mentioned KPI and metric.
Yeah.
So now I've got to ask a question about that. How do you go about measuring customer experience? Because I remember from my long time ago days in the hospitality industry, you would have customers come in, you buy a steak or whatever the case may be. They would leave, they were all happy, but you'd find out later on they weren't. So, but there was no way, the only way to measure that was through word of mouth back then. So considering all the tools we have today, how do you measure customer experience, and where do you measure along that path?
Where do we measure along the path? So one, there's a number of ways I think you can measure the customer experience. So if we're talking about the customer being our internal stakeholders for business continuity planning, the plan owners, the process owners, I think that it's a matter of survey. So after perhaps a tabletop exercise, you've gone through the BIA, you've developed the plan, you've executed the tabletop exercise. You throw them a survey. What was effective? What can we do better? What are the gaps that you saw? I think that's one way. The other way is measuring the health of the program by dates. So these are through scoping. We identify all the plans that we want to build. Did we build those plans within X period of time or by required expiration date or approval date?
Kind of like a milestone?
Yeah, milestone. So for instance, if we are to refresh a business continuity plan on an annual basis, we want to have milestones in place to know that one, we started on that BIA perhaps 3 months prior to the plan annual expiration date. With another milestone, we have started to build that plan maybe 2 months prior to the expiration date. And if we haven't, we're in the red. And also, if we haven't gotten that plan approval, maybe even 2 weeks. I hate to go up to the right up to the expiration date, but then we're definitely in the red. So I do think that there are milestones you can set. Another way to assess the quality of your program is how many people are engaged within your organization. We have so many opportunities, whether it's a preparedness fair, hosting a preparedness fair, getting those messages out through the intranets or through newsletters or through HR and our frontline managers. How many people are engaged? And I think you can get a feel for it. Yeah. So
is it simply as excuse me, customer experience is red, yellow, green, or is it better to kind of scale it along the lines of their maturity, how well they're doing? One finance, let's say, yeah, they've documented everything, they're doing everything and they're fantastic. And then one other group is maybe 2-3 months behind. So do you kind of measure them the same or measure them in a way that kind of says who's delivering and who's not delivering, who's at risk and who's hopefully is not as much as at risk if something occurs? Do you kind of take that kind of a perspective into account?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the maturity of plans in place for those critical functions, I think you definitely have to consider that, as well as any items you're looking to control. So and how close you are to closing those to effectively respond and recover should something happen. So I think you bear that in mind. But for regulated industries, it could be a green, yellow, red. We may need to have a plan in place by X period of date to meet some regulatory requirement. That's definitely checking a box measurement, which drives me crazy. But I think it does. It just drives me crazy.
I agree completely.
A culture of resilience is so important. And a part of that culture of resilience is admitting that we have gaps, is admitting that we have things that we need to control and being okay with that and being open and transparent about it. So, I think when we're showing we are taking steps, measured steps to close those gaps. I think that we were probably a little more honest, as well as showing that improvement to mature those plans that may not be as in depth or ready to respond and recover when the bad thing happens.
Okay. On that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. Today, we are talking with Charlein Barni about BCM and the customer experience. We'll be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.